Welcome to the Healing Grove podcast. I'm Dr. Kristin, an integrative holistic family physician, author of Life After Lyme, and host in this virtual space of learning, healing, and growing. I believe humans are like trees, and our physical limb is only one of many. Health on all limbs of the tree, emotional, conceptual, social, spiritual, is absolutely required for the whole tree that is you to be vibrantly well. I created the Healing Grove podcast as a place to showcase some of the world's best integrative and holistic medicine, to expose you to transformative tools and mindset shifts for all limbs of your tree. I hope you enjoy our conversation in the Healing Grove today as much as I enjoyed having it. So welcome, Anne Vandewater, to the Healing Grove podcast.
Oh, it's so good to be here with you. What an honor.
Oh my gosh. Well, I feel the same way. I've been following you forever through your emails and just the amazing content you put out into the world. And I just really wanted to share you with this community because you're such an inspiration to me. And I think so many people will resonate with your message.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm really excited to share.
So I'll by introduction, I'll say that I'm really going to let you introduce yourself, but I'll tell a little bit about how I came to know about you. So my sister Bethany is tapped into a lot of amazing humans, and you were one of those people that she has told me about. And maybe 10 years ago, I got on your email list. You might have been the first email list I was ever on, actually. Like I never used to sign up for stuff or put my name in for summits or whatever. I didn't want to get spammed. Your emails are like the furthest thing from spam. In fact, I always, as I'm crafting my email, I'm like holding you as my role model of like, how do you write a heart-centered email that is delivering an important message to humans who might not know about you or think they want to hear about you? And how do you do that in a loving and embracing way? And I always feel like I'm holding myself to your standards. So thank you for that.
Aw, thank you. Well, one of my little slogans is live, love, and lead by example, because I think that's the best way that we can love and support each other is, as Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. Yeah. So I'm happy that I've been an inspiration, and that motivates me to keep doing it. So thank you for the reflection.
You're welcome. So Anne is a business coach and a health and wellness teacher. Some might say guru, a spiritual guide, and a musician, I just learned, and so much more. And I love what you say on your website about my dream vocation didn't exist, so I created it. You're such a badass. I just want to hear you tell the story of how you came to the work that you're doing now.
Wow, amazing. Wow, okay. So I'm going to start with the very beginning, because I feel like the very beginning and how we begin everything has a huge impact on how things unfold. So for those of you that are listening, you may or may not feel or resonate with being a multidimensional soul and having wisdom that is inside of us that's been here for a long, long time. That's a huge part of my worldview. So what I'm about to share comes from that perspective. And if it doesn't resonate with you, then consider it just a tall tale. So I remember my conception. And I remember being the egg, and I remember being the sperm. And this is my origin story. This is the very first story that I ever lived. And it has had a huge impact on my entire life and where I am now and where I will continue to go on this trajectory. So I remember being the sperm, and my mantra was, I am the one. And I'm the only one. And I was surrounded by billions of other sperm, and we were all swimming along, and some of them were struggling, and some of them were dying, and some of them were racing along with me. And I really wanted to stop, and I really wanted to help them. But I knew that I would not be able to accomplish my mission if I did that. I had to stay on path. I had to stay on course. And so I just kept going. And with this mantra, I am the one. I'm the only one. I'm the one. And then I, as the egg, was in this place of only the best. And I had this I was like this sphere of only the best. So I remember this as my two, I would say, modes of consciousness, or my two main mindsets, or my two main beliefs, is I am the one, only the best. And as the sperm, I was swimming, and I knew I was going to create something. And as the egg, it was only the best. I'm only going to create the best. And when I, as the sperm, got to I as the egg, I got even more like, no one's getting in here unless you are the one, and you have to know that you're the one. And I was in this place of like, I need to feel it. I have to know it in the core of my being. I have to have crystal clarity. And I, as the sperm, knew that I had to hold that consciousness of I am the one. And I knew that on either ends of that the best wouldn't happen. And I wouldn't be co-creating the best if I didn't come from that place. So this dance went on. And then finally I was like, okay, you've proven yourself. You are the one. And as the egg. And so I surrendered, and I allowed me, the sperm, to enter with this, I am the one. And then there was a giant blast of light, and then I was created. And my very first memory after I was born is I was being held by my mom, and I was about 5 weeks old, and I was surrounded by some family friends. And my core memory and mindset and consciousness was, I am love. I am here to love. I am here to be love. And there's nothing that I actually have to do other than just be love. So this is where it all started for me. And I have had profound experiences like this my whole entire life. I've been surrounded by spirit guides and gods and goddesses and all of these things that were not taught to me. They were just in my consciousness. And from a very young age, I was always fighting for the underdog. I was always standing up for people that were being bullied. I was always deeply, deeply fascinated with God and spirituality, and most of all, what makes us tick. What I've now come to realize is our human potential. And I feel that has been this ongoing motivator in my life, is like, let's get down to the heart of the matter. And so when I was a child, I was very blessed in that my mom was into some things that were not mainstream at that time. So I now currently teach at a place called Rancho La Puerta. It's the original health and wellness center on the planet. It was created over 80 years ago. It was co-created by a couple named the Professor Edmund and his wife, Deborah Zeke. And she turned 101 in May. And we were there for her 101st birthday. My mom has been taking me there since I was 6 years old. So I was introduced to yoga and juicing and hiking and and meditation and all of these health and wellness things from the time I was very young. And I remember the very first time I was taken to a yoga class, it was at the Montecito YMCA. And I was supposed to go to daycare, but I said, I really want to go to yoga with you, Mom. And she said, okay, but you have to sit on the sidelines. And I said, okay, no problems. And I remember it so deeply. And I was on the sidelines and I was watching this class and I was like, well, I do those things all the time. So I started doing the class on my own on the sidelines. And these were positions that I always did. And so I was born a yogini, and I've actually had people look at my astrology chart. I've had yoga teachers across the tides of time just say, you're a natural, you were meant to do this. And it's really true for me. And so that was, I would say, one of my first healing arts that I really got into. I was also, my mom started giving me the gift of getting professional massages when I was young. I know, really young. So I was very fortunate in that I was exposed to a lot of these things from the time I was young. And my mom isn't some like, hey man, kind of hippie person. She's very, very practical and down to earth. And she knew that there was power in these practices. She was the first one to give me my first tarot deck. So she's super down to earth and practical, but she also has some woo woo and some magic in her. And both of my parents were not into religion or spirituality or anything like that, but I was obsessed with it. And when I asked my mom, who's God? What's the meaning of life? What are we all here for? She said, that's the adventure of a lifetime, is finding out. And so,
what a great answer.
I know. Isn't it so awesome? And
Yeah.
so that's been with me my whole entire life, as well as of like, you are the one, right? And I mean, that's what I'm encoded with, is I'm the one that's on this adventure. This is my life. This is my exploration. This is my experience. And I'm very lucky that my parents also had a very strong work ethic, and they always just said, do whatever you want to do, but whatever you do, work at it and devote yourself. So I've also been very encoded with mastery and going after what I love. And so that's the major background from where I came from. And what happened throughout my life is, when I was a little kid and people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would say, I want to be an artist, which I was, because I was always an artist and always a musician. I want to be a teacher. I knew that I was going to be a teacher, and I loved being around amazing teachers. I was just lit up by amazing teachers. And I said, I want to be a doctor, because I wanted to help heal people. And so when I said on my website, my dream vocation didn't exist, so I had to create it myself, I ended up being all of those things. I am a teacher. I'm a healer. I'm a health and wellness teacher. I'm a life and a business coach. And then I'm a spiritual guide. And everything is my art. I call it the art of living well as my true self, aligned with my full potential. That is my life purpose statement. So all of this led me to, first of all, going to Parsons School of Design. And I was going for a BFA in commercial design, kind of like graphic arts, and BA in philosophy and psychology. And it was going to lead me to a career in advertising. And I was being vetted by a lot of advertising firms who, when I graduated, wanted me to join their firms. And I was like, I don't know if I can make the moral sacrifices to do this, because at that point I was so deep on my spiritual path. At that point in the journey, I was struggling with some eating disorders, and I was working with a psychologist who was telling me about the power of the subconscious, and that our subconscious, our beliefs and our thoughts lead to our feelings, and our emotions lead to our actions, lead to the results that we get in life. And these are ancient teachings. It's one of my core teachings. And I was getting really switched on to consciousness. And I was like, I don't think I can make the moral sacrifices that I would have to make to go into advertising, because I don't want to hack people's consciousness to buy a bunch of crap that they don't need. I want to hack consciousness to help people awaken to their true self and to their spiritual self. And I was deeply devoted to the triumph of the human spirit and to health and wellness. And I was deep on my health and wellness journey, even though I was struggling with these eating disorders that were really came from subconscious beliefs that I had to look a very perfect way in order to be loved. That was the not true self narrative that was running in my consciousness from being brought up in Montecito, California, where everybody's beautiful. And everybody is beautiful inside and out. I know the most extraordinary people, but I had this huge pressure of being perfect, which I would say is the dark side of only the best, and I am the one. And there's a fine line between our human potential and self-sabotage. And so I was struggling with that at that time, but I also was so deeply devoted to finding my way through. And so I was taking this philosophy class called The Power of Myth, which is, we were reading Joseph Campbell's book, The Power of Myth. And I read the line, follow your bliss and doors will open where there were only walls, and a path will be laid out before you that would never ever be there if you didn't follow your bliss. And I had one of those like sudden enlightenment type of moments where I said, going down this path of going into advertising, which I'd been struggling with, I was like, nope, that's not my path. I need to go full on into human consciousness and what makes people hack and helping people. I want to hack consciousness to help people be who they truly are. So I dropped out of that program, and then I took some time off, managed a restaurant and a jazz bar, because I loved being around the music and being in hospitality and helping people in that way. And then I became a massage therapist when I was 19 years old. And it was, I'd say, a kind of more unusual type of thing at that point. And then I ended up going to school to become a religious studies major, because I was like, is it philosophy? Is it psychology? Is it religion that I want to study? And I was like, what makes people tick more than anything is our spiritual beliefs. So I was a religious studies major. I was studying in a class called Hindu Myth and Image. And my professor brought out a poster of Shiva, who is the Lord of yoga, but I didn't even know it. All I knew was I was seeing this poster of this really sexy, hot Hindu god. And I was like, oh my gosh. It was like, but it was deeper than just like a girl crush. It was like a soul yearn when I saw this picture of him. And I was like, that is so familiar. Who is that? I recognize him, but I'd never been introduced to him. And I lean over to my girlfriend and I was like, oh my gosh, Shiva is so hot. And she said, Shiva's the Lord of yoga. She said, and I'm like, oh my gosh. She said, maybe you're a yogini. And I said, what's a yogini? And she said, it's a female who practices yoga. And I said, I practice yoga. I've been practicing yoga on and off my whole life. And she said, well, I'm a yoga teacher at Santa Barbara Yoga Center. Would you like to come to my yoga class? And I said, sure. So I started going to her Tuesday, Thursday donation based yoga class, and it was vinyasa flow. And I'd done like Iyengar, and I'd done Kundalini, and I'd done Hatha yoga, but I'd never done vinyasa flow. And for about the first 3 months, I literally got my ass kicked because it was so cardio and it took so much strength. And I was more like into like, you know, a little bit mellower styles. And what happened is it felt like my snow globe was getting shaken, and all of this stuff, like these physical pains were getting unearthed, all this psycho-emotional like shadow frequencies were coming up, and all these memories. And I felt really, really ugh. So I went to her. I made a special trip to go visit her. And I said, I've been doing this consistently for 3 months. And I said, I thought yoga was supposed to make me feel good. I'm like, I feel kind of like crap. This is gnarly. All of this stuff is coming up. And she said, yes, that's what it's designed to do. She said, all you have to do is just show up. Keep doing it. It's working through you. And I was like, okay. So begrudgingly, I went back to yoga class the next day. And I was in a very simple bridge pose. And I just started, I'd done this throughout my life where I just go inward. I just start going inward. I'd have many profound experiences throughout my life of where I just go, I'm going to take my focus off of the external and I'm going to go inside of myself. And I felt myself going like, woo, 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 deeper and deeper and deeper, and just focusing on my breathing and focusing on my heart center. And as I went deeper and deeper, I was feeling all of this like, protection over my heart, but I just kept breathing and I kept going into my heart space. And then there was this, phew, and it was like the clouds parted and this light came shining out of me. And I had this feeling that I've been telling you about throughout my whole entire life. I had that I am the one, only the best. I had this inner light. I felt the I am love. I felt my true self. I felt my essence. I felt my spirit, and I was in bliss. And I decided right then and there, I want to be here 24/7. Like, this is where I want to live, and I'm going to devote myself to living in this realm. And so I kept going to that class, and then I started doing Ashtanga yoga, and I just kept going and going deeper and deeper into my explorations of yoga and breath work and meditation. And then I was so in love with my teacher, whose name is Stephanie Keach Aldrich. I was so in awe of her. I was like, I want to do what she's doing. I want to live in this realm. So I signed up for a yoga teacher's training at White Lotus and in Santa Barbara. And I went to it because I just wanted to immerse myself in yoga for 2 weeks. And 5 days in, we had to do a little sample teaching. And I remember right before doing that, I was like, I really have to get into the mindset of this. I have to like get my consciousness on board with this. And I wrote in my journal, and I felt like I was being so radical in what I wrote. I wrote down, I am a yoga teacher. And I felt like I can never show this to anybody because this is never going to happen. And I went and I taught that class, and every single person came up, and it was like 15 minutes. Every single person came up and said, you're a natural at this. That was just like you've done this before. And I said, it felt so natural. It was like breathing to me. And then the next day, or a week and a half later, when the training ended, the next day after that, someone reached out and asked me to sub their class at Santa Barbara Yoga Center because they were sick, and they asked every other teacher and no one was available. And I said, okay, but I'm a junior grasshopper at this. So I subbed this class, and the same thing happened. People came up to me afterwards and they said, it's clear that you're getting your sea legs on, but they said, keep going because you're meant for this. And then a month later, I was approached by Gold's Gym to start teaching, and I was a yoga teacher. It was like, boom. So it was the healing arts of being a massage therapist, then becoming a yoga teacher, and then I was a full-time yoga teacher. So I was one of the people that brought it into mainstream consciousness. When people were saying, you teach yogurt? And I'd say, I'm a yoga teacher. And then that led to teaching one-on-one sessions, starting the Yoga in the Schools program, teaching at the Cancer Center of Santa Barbara, teaching bhakti yoga, teaching yoga and philosophy and history, teaching retreats, teaching tons of workshops, and being a guest teacher in a lot of other trainings, teaching at the Esalen Institute. And then what was happening in about 2010 is a lot of my one-on-ones and a lot of my group students and clients were coming to me for life advice. And there's this good old saying, off the mat, out into the world. And they were wanting to know about, how do I tap into all this stuff that I'm tapping into in your classes, but like apply it to the rest of my life? And so I started to basically like counsel people. And every once in a while, people would come to me for a private yoga session, but we'd sit there and we'd talk the entire time. And I'd be giving them spiritual guidance. I'd be giving them life guidance. And one of my dearest friends said, "Man, I just took this life coach course." And she said, "I think what you are doing with these people is you're life coaching them." And I'm like, "Really?" And she said, "You should go check out this place." So I went to it's now called Coactive Training, but it was the Coaches Training Institute then. It's considered like the Harvard of the life coaching schools. And I went and I did this 4-day workshop. And again, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I do. Like, this is already what I do. And people were like, you're a natural at this. And I'm like, I know, I'm already doing this. So I decided to take the whole course. And meanwhile, I had gone through a radical transformation. I'd gone through a divorce, and the crux of it was, in the core of my very being, I knew that it wasn't a match for me, but I was trying to make something work that I knew wasn't really a match for me. And one of the apex days was, I'd been out teaching yoga all day long, teaching about love, light, and bliss. And then I came home and I had this knockdown, drag out fight with the guy that I was married to, who, by the way, I always send love and blessings to. And as far as I know, he's married, and I know he had a daughter. So I'm very, very happy for him. But we were a little bit of a tumultuous pair. So I came home and we got into this fight, and I remember just collapsing on the floor saying, this is not my life. And I felt like a fraud, because I was teaching all about love and compassion and forgiveness and all of these things, but I wasn't living it in this marriage. And that led me towards divorcing him. And after I divorced him, because of this feeling of being a fraud, I also had a very powerful experience at the Esalen Institute, which has definitely shaped me as a teacher and a guide and a coach, where I realized it is so out of integrity of me to ever teach something that I don't embody. And I was basically given, I know this sounds kind of gnarly, but I was given an ultimatum by my guides at Esalen, and they said, until you embody what you teach, you will not be able to teach here again. And so there was actually a 2-year gap between the first time I ever taught there and then the second time that I taught there. And I now have been teaching there.
That was because they knew about your divorce, or that was because you brought that to them? Like, how did they?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little backstory. When I was a religious studies major, I ended up doing an independent research project on hallucinogens and their contribution to the cultivation of religion. And during that time, I was always in the special collections library, and I was doing tons of research. And whenever I would do my research, I would keep hearing about this place called the Esalen Institute, because a lot of that was happening at the Esalen Institute when it started. So when I was a religious studies major at the time, and 2 of my dearest friends at the time said, hey, let's go on a road trip up to San Francisco to go visit some friends. And I said, great. And I said, how do you guys feel about taking the coastal route and stopping off at this place called the Esalen Institute that I've been hearing about? There are hot springs there, and it's the human potential movement, and I think it'll be really cool. And they said, awesome. Let's go for it. So I called Esalen, and it turned out you can't just show up there. You have to be taking a workshop, or at that time, you could go from 1 until 3 a.m. in the morning and take a hot tub, go into the hot springs. So we signed up for that, pulled into Big Sur about 9. It was really early. So we drove up the coast, ended up pulling off at Nepenthe. And there was a little sign up that said astrological party. And I'm like, I'm into astrology. So we go up to the main dining room, and they'd cleared out all the tables. There was an amazing DJ playing music and a big table filled with desserts. And everybody said, come on in, have some dessert and dance. So we danced our asses off and drank a bunch of water and ate desserts for like 3 hours. And then we went back to Esalen. And we walk down, it's pitch dark, other than like the moon and the stars. And I sit in the Esalen hot springs for the first time. And I'm listening to all the sounds. There's the waves and there's the wind. And I'm listening, and I'm going in. I'm going in and in and in while connecting to this magical place. And I'm in the hot springs on the cliffs. It's just amazing. And I start hearing this voice. And this voice, remember, I'm not a yoga teacher yet. I haven't done any of that. I'm a religious studies major. And this voice starts saying, you are a teacher. And I'm like, what? I'm not a teacher. And again, you are a teacher. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And again, it got louder, and it was like, you are a teacher, and one day you will be a teacher here. And I was like, what? So I call that voice the guides. And I'm not going to go massively down the rabbit hole with it, but that voice that told me I'm a teacher and one day I would be a teacher there, I've been following that voice since I was 21 years old. I've been following the guide, and I call them the guides. They are the ones, when synchronistically I was invited to teach there. I was married at the time. I was not embodying what I was teaching. I was struggling. There was a disturbance in the force. And after I taught there, the guides, these aren't people, these are spirit guides, said, you got the gift, kid, but you're not living in alignment with your teaching. And we will invite you back. We will arrange for you to come back, but you need to go clean up your act. You are not allowed to be here unless you are the living embodiment of what you teach. bam, like I got slammed. So
They're
those,
no nonsense. Those guys are no nonsense.
oh, yeah. And they've done that to me a few other times. It's very Saturnian energy for me. It's either like you're aligned or you're out of alignment. And so that guidance that I receive from those guides there, and I've now come to learn it's deeply connected to the Esalen tribe, the first people of the land there. It's the leaders, it's the visionaries, it's all of the mojo that has been there for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It's where the shamans lived. It's where people went for healing. It's where people went to come back into alignment. And I have a deep, deep soul alignment with that place. And so when I got that, it was a command. It was like mic drop command. I went home and that's when I filed, I told the man I was married to, I want a divorce. That's a long story, but that ended up happening. And then I started practicing every single thing I teach. So it's like, you're not allowed to even teach yoga unless you practice yoga. You're not allowed, it's that level. You're not allowed to teach breath work unless you practice it. You're not allowed to teach meditation unless you practice it. So all I did was I started practicing what I teach. I started practicing what I preach. And I was like, damn, this stuff really works. Like, whoa, I went through a radical transformation, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And people started to ask, what did you do? And I realized, oh, I have a formula. I have a blueprint. I can actually teach people this, and I can help people go through the transformation that I've gone through. So I started to do these sessions, these life coaching sessions, but it was like life and business coaching, health and wellness teachings, and spiritual guidance all put together in this unique approach and this unique offering. And so when I went to become a life coach and I actually got the training, then the International Coaches Federation, I had to jump through a bunch of hoops and do all the red tape stuff, but they grandfathered me in and they gave me my credentials because I'd already coached so many people. So that was that part of the journey. And then the business coaching really started to come in because I work with leaders, visionaries, entrepreneurs, light workers, change makers, people that want to make a positive difference. And people then are like, I want to do what you're doing. And so what I help people do is first and foremost is it's the I am the one, is I help people to take 100% responsibility for themselves. And I call it the personal empowerment process, because what I've learned is until you take responsibility for your life, you're not going to be able to be who you know you are, because you are the source of it. And then the next thing is I help people through what I call the authentic alignment process, which is getting clear about your purpose, which is what deeply fulfills you, your values, which are your guiding principles, your message that you want to remind yourself of and share with others, and your vision for all the different areas of your life. And then the next process is called vibration transformation. And that's all the health and wellness practices for self-love, self-care, and I call them self-worth practices, because what happens when, as we know, when we love ourselves and take care of ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it raises our vibration. We clear stress and tension and heavy energy. We heal and repair ourselves, and we generate life force energy, and all of that raises our self-worth. And then the next part I call conscious creation. And that's all about how do you consciously create the life that you vision for yourself? And that's a combination of very down-to-earth, practical, high-performance life coaching and business coaching, and the more spiritual guidance part of connecting with your future self or your alternate reality self who's already created the life that you vision for yourself, and getting guidance from that part of you that already has the answers. And then from there, you have that embodiment piece. And then I feel you can go on and really, really help others, because you're no longer trying to serve from depletion. You're no longer trying to help from a place of overwhelm. So I call it living, loving, and leading by example. And I call that the luminous leadership process, where I help people to then serve from this place of overflow, of the good old, I've taken care of myself and now I have the energy to help others, and I'm living my message. I'm the living embodiment of my teachings. And then the kind of crowning glory of all of it, I call the legacy of light process, which is all about creating your legacy, which is your life. And it's the way that you live your life. It is the art of living well as your true self. But then it's also about creating your one of a kind, unique offerings, which is all about versatile mastery, taking all of these different things that you love, that you embody, and putting them together in a unique way so that you can give a gift to those that you're here to serve, and that there's something that will live on when you're no longer in your body, so that your legacy lives on. So that's the story of how it's all come to be, and the Cliff Notes version.
Including the hot springs on a cliff.
Yeah.
Part of the Cliff Notes. So that's amazing. I think I got goosebumps 12 times maybe during that story. And to me, that's just a sign that I'm talking to someone who's totally living their truth.
Hmm.
You know, it's powerful. Starting with the sperm and the egg story, which to me didn't seem like a tall tale. It seemed like that legit happened.
Yeah.
So I'm super honored that you would share that with us. That's a pretty intimate moment.
I've shared that story before, and I always love sharing it. And even if people are like, that is really bizarre, for me, it's like, that's my origin story. And it shaped me. And I was actually just thinking about it, because I just had something really a magical manifestation happen. And it was because I held that in my consciousness, and I was like, it's right there. All I have to do is hold that in my consciousness at all times, while being loving and being compassionate with myself. And the fact that sometimes the sperm goes off course, sometimes the egg wobbles a little bit, but that's there as a deeply encoded entelechy for me. It's like it's my meant to be.
Well, it strikes me as a kind of origin story and mantra that, you know, all of us could benefit from embracing. You know, it's not like it sounds like a pretty generalizable rule that the egg's only going to want the best, and the sperm's only like going to get really clear on, if I'm the one, I better get moving, and I can't stop to help this other one, and I have to understand that everyone's on their own path, but this is my destiny. And so I think staying in touch with that is super powerful, but also teaching others to embrace that level of just, I guess, self advocacy and empowerment and worth.
Yeah. And that's why I call my work true self mastery. It's about becoming a master of being your true self, of living in alignment with your potential. And I do feel that, and I don't project, I do my best to not project onto anyone, because we're all on our own journeys. And essentially, we do have to figure out our own journey on our own. Otherwise, it's not really real, you know, when we're told something over and over and over, but it's when we come to it on our own accord and our own rhythm and our own timing that it's real. But I do feel that being here is an absolute miracle, and it's been proven that it's a miracle. The chances of having the sperm and the egg come together the way that they come together for us to get here is basically impossible. And I love the good old word impossible, which is I'm possible if you divide it. And I really feel that's the way that I do my best to look at each and every person that I work with, but then expanding that out the best I can to, you went through the same thing that I went through. Your egg was saying only the best. Your sperm was saying, I am the one. Because if you don't have that level of consciousness, I don't think it's possible to get here. I really don't, because it's basically impossible. Like you have to crack the code to get the amazing miracle of this lifetime. And once we get it, I feel that if we can stay connected to that, I am the one. I'm sovereign. I am going to take complete responsibility for my own beliefs and thoughts, for my emotions, for my words, for my actions, for the ways that I show up with people, places, and things, and do our very best to show up as what mainstream now calls the best self. I call it the true self. I also call it the best self. I wrote a book called Everyday Initiations, how every moment is initiating you to be your best self. And I feel we have to remember every single day. We have to remind ourselves every single day, because there are so many things that could take us out of alignment with that consciousness. But I do feel that it is the source of our healing, of our health, of our well-being, of our illumination, of our fulfillment, of our peace, is doing that inner work every day.
I mean, yes to all of it. Talking about healing is reminding me of our first conversation when I told you the story of my Lyme journey and how I was lying in my bed for so many years, for so many months. And it took me a couple of years to kind of climb out of that. And you pointed out that I was lying in my bed. I mean, in what ways was I lying to myself about the kind of doctor I was being at the time and what I was really supposed to be doing? And my head exploded just a little bit when you said that. You may not have noticed. Wasn't maybe obvious, but I was like, oh my, I mean, I'm totally in alignment with that. Our words are so, so powerful, and the metaphors we use and the metaphors our body uses to speak to us about what's truly going on and where we really have to look is so powerful. And just that I wanted to tell you, because I don't think I told you that day when we spoke. That was super helpful to hear, and it made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it was, I had an epiphany when I said it too. I'm a writer, and I'm really into linguistics, and the word abracadabra I say it every single day. I said it, and so it is. And so I'm always tracking language and seeing the hidden messages that are behind language. And when you were talking about lying in your bed, and then I was thinking of lying to yourself about who you really are, our body can't function when we're lying to ourselves. And I feel so many of the health challenges that we go through, the source of it is that. I have one of my dearest friends and a longtime client and student of mine. She was bedridden for a long time. And I refer to that part of her as well, the part of her that was lying to herself. And I feel that when we lie to ourselves, that we start to break down. And the ultimate of that is when if you end up being bedridden, or you're so completely zapped of energy, or there's so many things that are out of alignment or unbalanced or in disrepair that the body can't function anymore. And so what I always go to first and foremost is what I said of like, okay, wait a second. I'm going to take responsibility for what's happening right now. And it can be really, really hard. But when we think it's something else out there or someone else out there, and we don't do the personal empowerment part of like, oh, wait a second, I'm going to do everything that I can to shift this, that in and of itself, like I'm going to stop lying to myself, or I'm going to think about who I am and what really matters to me, that just creates so much healing energy. And when you told me your story, I told you I had all over goosebumps, and I was getting waves of truth chills, because that's what you did. And it was like that. You just stopped lying to yourself, and you got real with yourself, and you reclaimed yourself, and you reclaimed your truth and your essence. And that just made the light go, phoo. Again, that was, I am the one, only the best. In yoga, you've probably heard of this. The core teaching is Sat, Chit, Ananda. And Sat means truth or being. Like our being is truth. And Chit means consciousness. It's like being conscious all the time of the truth of who we really are, the truth of our being. And when we do that, we get Ananda, which is bliss and health and success and fulfillment and all the goodness, the benevolence of life. So you did that. You're like, I'm getting real with myself. I'm meeting my truth. I'm staying in full consciousness of that. And then woo, miracles happened.
Yeah. I mean, the miracles started to happen, even though, and this is the part that blows my mind, I had the same level of pain. Like the pain didn't change. But the second I shifted and I realized I was making the decision to live, and that the ultimatum about that was, the requirement was, if you're going to live, it's only going to be for saving the planet, jumping on trampolines with your daughter, and not lying about who you're becoming as a doctor.
Whoa, I got him again.
Me too. And I remember thinking, wow, well, I don't have any emotion around that, which is strange because I'm a generator and usually I feel my feelings and then I know my thing. But like the next thing I know, I'm like out of bed and my body's like dragging me to PT, and then it's dragging me downstairs to have breakfast. And I got into bed that night and I was like, oh, hello, stranger. I haven't seen you all day. I've been cheating on my bed with life. And it was like, I never really needed to lie around anymore, even though I was still in 10 out of 10 pain when I was standing up. And occasionally I had to lie down in between patients or at the grocery store, whenever I had terrible pain, but the suffering around it was gone.
Yeah. There's a difference between pain and suffering. Yep. That's one of the big Buddhist teachings, which is so true. I want to ask you a question about when the pain started to shift, because one time I went through a challenge with my mom, which is rare. I've only gone through a few challenges with her, but I went through one, and I woke up the next day and I had horrendous pain, like in my neck and my shoulder. And I couldn't teach yoga. I couldn't practice yoga. I was like sobbing and crying. I was in so much pain. And a friend of mine said, have you ever read John Sarno's book, Heal Your Back?
Yeah.
That's what it's called. And I said, I do have that book. And he's like, reread it right now. So I reread it and I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. So I shifted it so that I was just saying, subconscious mind, I am in control. So it was like I took the reins back from the subconscious mind. And I was like, I know you don't want me to feel my feelings, but I'm going to feel my feelings. And the feeling that I was having was this major anger towards my mom, and which was not allowed. Like, good girls, spiritual yoga teachers should not be mad at your mom or pissed at your mom. And I was pissed, and I was like, oh my God, I have to express this. And she knows this story. So it's not like this is some hush hush thing. And I tell this story. I walked around my house going like, and I just started letting out all this anger, and then it unearthed other anger. And I was just walking around like cussing and stomping. But my pain level went from like 100% plus, plus, plus down to like 80, down to like 60. And then I could go to sleep. And then the next day, I just kept doing it. And my pain level over the course of 2 weeks went from like off the charts 100 down to 3%. And then it took another like month for the last 3%. But again, it was this command that came from my body. My body was like, I can't hold on to all of this emotional anger. You have to let it out. And I didn't do cortisol shots, or I didn't do anything. I just expressed anger. So what happened for you with your that helped your pain body release?
Yeah, I don't. So the first thing I want to say in response to what you just shared, for people who haven't heard of John Sarno, that actually, I was thinking about that book earlier during your sort of origin story in early years, because that was a huge epiphany for me. That book, when I had my first bout of back pain, I didn't have eating disorders in my 20s. I had back pain. It came and went. I actually had back surgery when I was 19. I had, I was out of swimming competitively for a few months. It was a big, big deal for me. And when I found his book, it blew me away. And the concept basically is like our body, our subconscious will distract us from painful emotions or thoughts that we don't permit ourselves to have by creating pain in the body to kind of divert our attention. So pain in your body, you can really just pull back and go inward, as you said, and kind of ask what's really going on here, and then process that to get the pain to resolve. So the hard thing for me about this pain that I had, it was sciatic pain. It was right-sided, basically a knife in my right buttock all the way to my foot. And interestingly, when I would lie down, it would completely resolve. So part of what my interpretation of that was, well, my body is telling me I need to be lying down right now. I don't necessarily know why, but I need to trust that this is a pretty clear message that lying down is the only safe place to be right now, or the only pain-free place to be. So I spent a lot of time, like I said, I would drop to the floor in the grocery store, for 2 years. I would lie on my back. When I went back to seeing patients, I would have my computer on my back in between patients and be writing my notes on my back in the office, because it was 10 out of 10 pain or 0 out of 10, and give my back a rest. And I did spend quite a lot of time asking that question. Why do I still have pain? What I feel like, and I was changing my career. I was disentangling myself from a toxic workspace and the hospital job, and creating my own blissful, like sitting in my cozy socks with my patients, talking about all the things I was learning and sharing those tools. I felt like I was on my path. And so it was quite confusing to me. And I would say the pain suffering was gone, but there was still this kind of intellectual suffering of like, haven't I cracked this code? Haven't I suffered enough? Haven't I learned enough? I mean, what else is there to learn? I remember one time I was lying on the floor, as I did, in a good friend of mine's house, and picking up a kid from soccer, dropping off, and I just dropped to his hallway among the shoes, and I'm lying there talking to him. I mean, it became that normal. It still blows my mind. I'm like, wow, how do my friends not kind of give me the weird look? But that was my normal. And I said, why do you think I am still having to lie on your floor intermittently to relieve this pain? What do I still have to learn from this? And this is not the kind of guy who maybe would answer that question. Well, actually, he did answer the question. He said to me, maybe you're learning what it feels like to be downtrodden. Wow. Well, and he's a projector. So when he talks, I listen as a good generator. He's always the guy, when I ask him a question, he delivers. And he was like, and I said, wow, And interestingly, the next week I was at a conference, and this surgeon I was working with in a small group later said to me, "What's wrong with you today? You look so downtrodden." Those are the only two times I've ever heard modern humans use that word. I was like, this is so weird. So anyway, I feel like there was still stuff to be learning. And I don't pretend to have a handle on all of why it was. I went to this other conference a few months later, and a good friend of mine was hearing my whole story, and I was whining to her about how come I'm still in pain. I don't understand it. I spent half the conference on my back taking notes.
Yeah.
And she turned to me and she said, "Kristin Ryman, what makes you think you're so special that you get to understand everything about what goes on with you? Only God gets to know all of it."
Woo!
And I was like, wow,
Whoa.
you're right about that. So that's when I just stopped asking. And I just said, I'm going to just go with the flow of what my body's telling me in a given day. I'm going to stop beating myself up for still being in pain and not having this totally figured out yet. And I'm just going to move forward as if I'm healing and it's on God's timeline and not mine.
My gosh. That is so amazing. Every day, I write down what I call my manifesto, my purpose, values, message, vision. And at the end, I do a prayer. And the very end of the prayer is, may this all unfold in the divine right time and in the divine right way. Because there is a divine rhythm to everything. And I just love what your friend said. Like, only God can know that. I wrote a song once, From God Knows Where. That's what it's called. And I find that to be so true. And I had this amazing experience once at Esalen where I was talking about how mysterious life is to some friends. And I was like, we think we've got it all figured out, or we think we should have it all figured out. But most of life is a mystery. And there was a guy next to me, and he said, "What'd you just say?" And I repeated myself. He said, "You're exactly right." He said, "I'm a yogi." And I said, "I'm a yogini." And he said, "And I've studied all of the scriptures." And I said, "Me too." And he said, "This is what all the scriptures say, is that only God knows, and that life is a mystery, and all we can do is align with God consciousness or the mind of God." And then he said, "And I'm an astrophysicist at NASA, and we've proven the same thing. This whole entire thing is a mystery." He said, "How much of everything in life do you think is figure outable?" And I went with the good old 90-10 thing. And I said, "Maybe 10%. He said, "It's less." And I said, 8%. He said, "Less." And I was like, 5% is figure outable? He said, "Less." I said, 2? Less. I said, 1? He said, "It's even less than that." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "Only 0.2% of all of this is figure outable. The other 99.8% is a total mystery." And I was like, just mind blown. But what you just said is like, it just sounds like you surrendered in a big way. You just surrendered to God. You surrendered to spirit. You surrendered to the healing energy, letting it do its thing.
Yeah. And it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't after it took a street fight. It took like finally getting exhausted because, you know, as a thinking person who puts a lot of stock in the training and experience and understanding and my illusion of control with all the stories I tell about why things happen, it was a big thing to let go.
Yeah.
Big drop and not be like chewing on, because it felt like failure. And finally I was just like, whatever it feels like, it is what it is. Like, this is what I have to do now.
Amazing. That is so amazing. There is the best comic strip that I love so much. It's just 2 frames. And the first one is a guy who looks probably like Jesus, but it's Jesus, or it represents God. And then there's this guy, a human, just a mere mortal, standing next to him. And he says, "You see right there?" And they're looking over, and there are there's like a drag through some sand, like a long, like if you drag something through the sand and it makes a long mark. He said, "You see that right there?" He's like, "That's where I had to drag you." And then he said, "You see right there? And it's just little footsteps." He said, "That's where I carried you."
That's awesome. Well, it's like a riff off those Hallmark cards, which are like, God, where were you? I see only one set of footprints during my most difficult time. But
Yeah.
the idea that, like, sometimes you have to be dragged.
Yeah.
And
Sometimes,
sometimes there's
sometimes
going to
I
be
had
a
to
two by
drag you.
four up your head, and we're going
I
to knock
know.
you out, and we're going to drag you.
Have you heard of the Hoffman quadrinity process?
No.
It's a very well-known, I think it's like 10-day process that you go through. And it's like physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. That's the quadrinity.
Wait, I have a friend of mine from med school went through this.
Yeah, I did it right after my dad passed away. And when I was 28 years old, and I was going through my Saturn returns. And the message that I was delivered at the very end of the whole entire thing, because your guide, your leader, kind of does a little like Shazam message at the end about what your main Achilles heel is, or your shortcoming, or your main shadow frequency is. And he said, "Anne, stop playing God with God." Because there's part of me too that's like, I want to be the micromanager of the universe. And when he said that to me, I was like, whoa. I mean, this life requires so much trust and so much faith and so much surrender to the benevolent source of all of existence, because it is so mysterious and there is no way that we can figure it out. So I just love your story because it's filled with so much grace despite your resistance and your struggles. It's also a story of your surrender and amazing grace shining through and healing you.
Thank you for that reflection. And I feel like I could talk to you for 4 hours about all the different things that pop up that we haven't even gotten to human design. This is why you have to come back and talk to the Healing Grove members so we can.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Dig into some more tools, but I just want to I want to leave it there with the mystery and with the grace. A teacher of mine, our chair of family medicine, Will Miller, used to talk about mystery, abundance, and grace being the kind of core features of what he called the turtle path, which was our journey to become healers. But mystery and grace and surrender and all of it, such challenging nuggets of the human experience, and yet maybe the things that make it all worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. And how the whole thing about downtrodden is, just to kind of wrap it all up, is I've found that every single challenge that I've gone through, I've deeply understood it later on. Like, oh, I had to go through that so that I would know how my client, how my student feels. I remember the first time I got injured, and I'd never had an injury in my life. And it totally changed the way that I taught yoga, because I was like, oh, this is what it feels like when you're doing this and you have an injury. So I do, that's part of my worldview, is that any challenge that we go through will become someone's survival guide. I just wrote an email about that whatever we're going through in the future, it's really going to help somebody else. Yeah. So thank you for being a living example of transforming I always say, no mud, no lotus, no irritation, no pearl, no pressure, no diamond, no storm, no rainbow. So I know that you're helping a lot of people because of your own struggles and challenges that you've been through. And I feel that when I'm in your presence.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
I love you so much, and I'm so grateful for you sharing your pearls and your story with us today.
I love you too. It's really a pleasure to be with you. I feel like I've met a kindred.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the same.
Mm.
Have a beautiful rest of your day, Anne.
Thank you. You too.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Healing Grove podcast. If you liked it, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to deepen your experience further, consider grabbing a copy of the Healing Grove Playbook. With journal prompts for this podcast and 41 others, it's the perfect place to record your learnings, keep track of the tools you explore, and reflect on your own experience. Finally, it's important to mention that even though I am a doctor, nothing you hear on this podcast, whether from myself or my guests, constitutes medical advice. Any intervention you try should always be discussed with and supervised by a trusted member of your own healing team. Thanks for listening, and see you next time in the Healing Grove.